Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rave Green TV. And we've seen our beloved Seattle Sounders officially be eliminated from playoff contention this season. This isn't going to be a review of the match against Sporting Kansas City. Yes, we will touch upon it a little bit. When I mean we, Rory has returned for a video. He hasn't been on for a really long time, but he's back, I guess, when the time is right, because I think just one opinion wouldn't be suffice for this video. I think differing opinions will help out a lot, especially in a very touchy time as it is now. And boys and girls, I want today's video to be a space where Sounders fans can talk about the situation in the comments down below, because I know sometimes it can be frustrating when you see your team lose, you see your team lose a historic streak. And, you know, I don't want you to be down in the dumps by yourself, be down in the dumps together with us. So yeah, so boys and girls, we're going to touch a little bit upon the KC game, but that's not the main target of today. We're going to talk about basically the Sounders got eliminated. What's our thoughts behind it? So I'll let Rory open it up for today's video. Rory, we're eliminated. Thoughts?
It's oh God, it really is awful, isn't it? Like it's one of those, like, none of us knew it happened until it did. Like even last week, I'd hope after the Cincinnati game, I was still like looking at just what was our possible route here and you know, how do we do it? But yeah, it sucks. I think there's two really big questions. The first one is the one that everyone is talking about, where was the CCL worth it? Is this because we went for the CCL? All that. But I also think the second one is like, is this going to be just this season, or will we collapse like so many other teams have? When we went through our period of making the MLS Cups, it was us in Toronto. Toronto completely fell apart. LAFC fell apart, although they're back. What's going to happen next year? Who are we going to sign? What changes are we going to make? And is this just a one season mishap because of, you know, the great success we had, or is it going to be, you know, this is the reality for the next 3 years while we figure it all out?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest thing for us to grasp is it because of CCL? And personally for me, I think okay, the topics I think we should discuss, which what are people are saying, which you touched upon. So there's one topic of injuries. That was one. Was the CCL a part of why we didn't make the playoffs this season? Did that really hinder us this year? And then another part was, does Garth not making any signings hurt us? And then who is to blame for all of these failures? And I think since you already brought it up with the CCL stuff, no, I really don't think us winning CCL is really a valid excuse, because I think everything deserves a little bit of context. And to go back to that CCL campaign, I think with the CCL excuses, it was only 6-8 games tacked on to our season. And if we were to because the common knowledge was the start of the season, we're going to fight in both competitions. If that was the common knowledge, then why didn't we bolster the squad to be able to fight in both competitions? There's a little bit of this gray area where I feel like the Sounders, in regards to the team, the players, the coaching staff, the organization, put out statements where they say, we're going to fight in both competitions. We're going to be competitive in both competitions. But then when we see the performances and the teams we brought out, like especially early on, we're basically putting in like B teams in some of our games early on in the season so we can put all our eggs in the basket in CCL. And kind of there's this gray area of like, when does the CCL, us winning CCL excuse kind of end? Because it dragged on 1 month. That's fair. 2 months. I don't know about that. 3 months, then 4 months. And then that's kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, listen, I think the CCL hangover should have ended within 2 weeks of winning it. And for the start of the season, I know obviously the team are going to come out and say, you know, we're going to be competitive in both. But for that first period of the season, and we were playing our B team in the MLS, I'm pretty sure that even the team expected to bounce back. And even they expected that, you know, once we're all back now in Seattle and we've won the CCL and we have maybe a week's rest, so we rest the game afterwards, after that win, like then we take the MLS seriously. And I think where they meant to be competitive was that once the CCL was wrapped up, then we're going to be competitive. But at the same time, like the warning signs were there from the very beginning. I remember like all of our playoff issues wouldn't be this severe if we beat San Jose way back. And that was around, and we played a full team for the CCL and we lost the game 4-3 after going up 3-1. So you're thinking like, you know, like what are we doing here? So the cracks were there. I think you caught them on a little bit better than most, but at the same time, I just think that this is just a natural period of any MLS team where we couldn't make any signings because there's a salary cap. We're in a salary cap league. In leagues with salary caps, teams have bad years. And, you know, haven't had one yet. And so we don't know what this feels like. And it's the end of the world. But I think we just need to take a breath and just all be depressed together for a little bit, but hopefully we'll be back next year.
Not to say it's a positive, but I think with this team, I think the issues actually for this team started last season in that run where we stopped winning games. So like we were in first place. We looked like one of the clear teams to win the Supporter Shield. Then we were on like 8 games before the playoffs where we just stopped playing good. Basically what we, for majority of the season, looked like. We just looked like when we went down 1-0, we weren't going to come back, or if we scored, there was nothing more than 1 goal. And if we were to get a goal, it was just a penalty. There was like no creativity. It didn't look like we were going to score. And I think that it transitioned to this season, excluding in CCL, where we looked like our normal selves for the most part in that tournament.
I wouldn't even agree there. Like I do think that the Sounders have had very bad luck with VAR. At the same time, I mean, when we went to Mexico City for the CCL, we had 2 penalties. Like, let's be clear. You know, like we have had a very, lucky season with penalties. A few weeks ago again, we had a penalty. Houston, right? And so with that Houston loss, like we're having this conversation last week, right? And so things like that, they go against you, but the expectation is that you do have enough in the locker to score more than 1 goal, or if you do go down, you actually have some sort of comeback. And we didn't this year. And last year we had brilliant squad depth. We had that first, we had that academy golden generation, we hope, come through, but also like the veterans that we had, they were also a year younger, right? Like Fredy Montero, I think, has had a bright few weeks, but he was a much better player last year than he was. And so Will Bruin as well. You could count on them for a goal or 2. But this season it's just, they're a lot older. Although the kids individually have gotten better, there's just a big hole in that midfield, which we didn't really figure out we still haven't. So it's a very confusing season, because you'd think after last year, at the very start of that season, like when we went on that unbeaten streak, and we had that game against Houston where it was Ruidíaz in the nursery, and we somehow pulled out a win. But we got very lucky there, and you'd think that the squad depth would be better because those players are older. But it didn't work out that way somehow, and it doesn't make sense, and it might not make sense for a while. But I think it's just a shame how it ended out. Just
to give a little snippet for today's video, where does the percentage lie for you? Because I think that's a good way to put it, because as I said, where do you think this goes down on with the players, with the coach, with Garth? So like, where would you give your percentages? I'm going to put it at 20% Garth, 30% the players, and 50% goes down to Brian Schmetzer.
Yeah, listen, I think that's fair. And before you point percentage, Lodeiro actually just said this. It's fresh off the press. He said, there are many mistakes that happen at the player level, the coaches level, and the club level. The CCL covered up many of these mistakes, but what happened will hopefully help us recover from these things. And then Schmetzer was asked about that exact quote, and he said, I'd say Nico is a very good captain, a proud individual. He was pushing, trying to create some tempo for us to score. I'd probably agree with Nico, which I feel that's pretty damning. But personally, I think majority of the blame lies on Schmetzer. Like we just started the season, and you do have an injury in midfield, which is a big hole. But you also have, you have 4 months to figure it out. And like we're not the only team in the MLS to have an injury. Certainly not. Like Atlanta have injuries all over their squad, and we're tied on points right now with them, although they're in a different conference, and so we're not the only team to have a big injury. But a part of coaching is, how do you respond to that? What do you do tactically? Like we changed tactics just about every week there for a while, and we still didn't figure it out. And then we just went back to the 4-2-3-1, and it didn't work. It worked against Houston, that was it, although that isn't a very good bar of your progression. So I do think most of the blame lands on Schmetzer. The players as well. Just the players have been horrific. Like I don't like bashing the players. I feel like I've moved on from that point where I just get angry at the players all the time, but they just haven't been good enough, and there's no really sugarcoating that. And this result will amplify that. In terms of Lagerwey and the squad that Schmetzer was given, it's a tough thing to balance in a salary cap league. We're right up against the salary cap, and I know Lagerwey said that in an interview where he said, if we want someone to come in, a player has to go out, and that's it. And so like you have to look at the contracts and saying, are we getting value for money here, off the big names and and the reserve players. So I couldn't place a percentage if I tried, because it really is a mix, right? But I'd say majority of the blame is on Schmetzer.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off what you said, just kind of add on to each side of it. Yes, I think Rory puts it really well, every team has injuries. And the only, to my knowledge, of key injuries we had was JP, but he's injured 2 months into the season. Easily could have solved these issues early on without him. And I know he's a really big player. The day I saw João Paulo play, I knew he was so important to this team. And he's been out though since the second month of the season. We had a transfer window to cover it up. Then that leads me to my point about Garth. In the interview, I think Rory's alluding to is he spoke about how if we wanted to make a signing, we would have to have lost 2 or 3 players next season, started the second half of this season, vice versa. But he decided he wanted to reward this team for winning the CONCACAF Champions League, which granted, that makes sense. But not every one of these players contributed to us winning the CONCACAF Champions League. And there is some dead wood in the squad, in my opinion. And that's where I give him, and I agree, there is the salary cap issue. That's why I say he is the smallest of the 3 percentages for me to blame. The players, there is clearly, especially with the big name players, and we will go more in depth. We'll have a post and a video talking about the ins and outs of who needs to stay, who needs to go this season. That's one of the last 3 videos on this channel. There are some big players that need to be spoken about, and I'm not going to talk about it in this video because I'm not going to say anything nice about them. And then in regards to Brian Schmetzer, I think what comes down to it with Brian is, and I'm going to go back to what I said, it all started last season when things started not going well. In that last 9 games of the season, when we got into the playoffs, tactics got stale. The team got stale. Players were not getting dropped that didn't play well. But if we're going to keep seeing the same players put up bad performances game after game, doesn't someone else maybe deserve a chance? Because Tacoma Defiance have been playing really well this season. I know there's a big jump. I don't know. The fact that we keep persisting with the same players every single game, there's a lack of squad rotation. And that's why we had so many injuries, because Obed Vargas got ran to the ground. That's why he got hurt. He played with an injury for a while. Same thing with Cristian Roldan with his hernia. And we persist with the players, then they get hurt. The only time we ever do a big squad rotation is when, for the game against Toronto, the game against Austin last season, is where, this is a midweek game. We have to drop everybody. We'll play all the kids this game. It's too extreme. There's no happy middle, in my opinion. And definitely that CCL run played a part because there's 8 extra games because we played our starting lineup. But I don't know. Everything's kind of all over the place in my head, but that's how I would view it.
I think that's fair. I mean, listen, there is the balance between you need your big name players to play better. You do. And, and although I do think Morris hasn't had a fantastic season. I mean, the same is true for Lodeiro. Lodeiro was present for a lot of the season, and he isn't the player he was last year. I know he had an injury 2 years ago, but he's certainly not the player he was 3 years back during that 2019 run. And I don't think Raúl has been brilliant, although he's shown those glimpses. He's also had an injury over the summer, so it's like, can you fairly judge that? It's a tough question to ask. I think Roldan never got settled because he was constantly being thrown around the field somewhere. He's either a winger, he's either he's your center defensive mid, or a different role in that midfield. So it's tough, but at the end of the day, like, I do think that Jordan Morris is at least an above average MLS player. Same with Roldan, same with Lodeiro, and you're thinking, why can't the coaching staff get anything better out of them? And so it's just frustrating. And I'll say about squad rotation, I think that at this point in the season, there's a pretty clear gap in the quality of the bench and the starting lineup. Like, we all had really high hopes for Leo Chu. He very clearly isn't in favor with the coaching staff. And on that point, Schmetzer and the coaching staff, they're seeing these guys every day. So I'll trust that, maybe Leo Chu isn't up to the standards to maybe get the start over Morris or Rusnák when he was on the left. Same is true for Dylan Teves. Like, I had really high hopes for him, but this season hasn't gone out well. And it's frustrating because, like, when these players come on, thinking of like Chewitt against Montagua or Dylan Teves against Toronto, they look good and you want to play them more. But it's one of those things that I think we just, we have to trust the staff with. So I think it's a question of going into the off season, you have to maybe replace Will Bruin. I think this year he's all these players, like, you love them and they've been here forever, and like, you want to see them succeed, but it just isn't working out anymore. Will Bruin, I think Montero has been interesting. He's had a bit of a rebirth in these last few games. Yeah, I think Montero is one of those questions that if you have him on a really short contract, that he absolutely can justify that. So you shouldn't be expecting him to play for Ruidíaz every week. But if you're looking for someone to get a scrappy goal in the 90th minute, yeah, like bring him on for change the tactics, bring someone on. I think we definitely have a defensive issue. I'm not sure who it is because everyone seems like the day someone plays good, the guy next to him will play bad, and we give up the same goal or they make the same mistake. And it's frustrating. There's no with the exception of Nouhou, I think Nouhou's been particularly poor. But between Alex Roldan, Yeimar, and Arreaga, all of them are just one mistake away from conceding a goal. And so you're thinking, hey, who has to go here? If they do go, I know they're contracted for next year. And Frei was brilliant today, but he's now 36 years old. I think the Cleveland would have left if the squad didn't guarantee him game time, at least for next year when he re-signed. So you're thinking, is he going to be starting every minute next year? So we have a lot of questions to ask. But I think the off season is definitely figuring out the midfield. I know JP will be back soon, but also just trying to upgrade that bench and maybe move some players around and cash in on one or two.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, the one thing I can say is us missing the playoffs. I think we will see big changes because I think that's the biggest slap in the face. And realistically, too, to be fair, we didn't deserve to be in the playoffs. In my opinion, I knew instantly after the Orlando match where we blew the 2-0 lead, we weren't making playoffs. I'm just that guy that just knows it. When I see it, I know it, I say it. Granted, I didn't say anything because I want to see how would it pan out. But I think at that game, that very moment, it was dead and buried. Obviously, now we have the official confirmation and we didn't deserve it. Like realistically, if we did somehow make it, it would have been because everyone else bottled it for us, which it almost seemed like it was going to happen, funnily enough. And because of, and it's just like, we just didn't deserve it. It's just simple as that.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, like we're out, we deserve to be out. We know that. And especially now the team, the front office knows that, but also the players know that. We're already seeing the cracks with that Lodeiro quote, which I'm interested to see what happens from that. Cause it's a pretty damning quote. And to be fair, it also criticizes the coach, the players and the front office, just like we've been talking about. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, even if we did scrap into the playoffs and we had to win against SKC and San Jose, who aren't great teams anyway, and we should be beating, we would have been in 7th. We would have gone straight up against Nashville or Austin. We would have been destroyed going away from home. So I mean, listen, we missed the playoffs. It's sad. The streak is over, but just focus on next year now. Nothing else matters. Just everything on next year, and we can also say we won the CCL. Not that I do think it was worth it in the end.
Next season, that's all we should worry about. Cool part will be Club World Cup will also be added. So now that we know we have an extra competition, depending also how it's formatted, because I don't have any official confirmation, but apparently the formatting is going to change. And we also don't know the time frame because this year's World Cup is during the time frame of this year's CCL. Let's see how this team will build depth for playing in that competition. Will we try to win that competition? And then how will we approach? How can we now bounce back from a failure in MLS in regards to our season this year in MLS? How will we bounce back from it? But boys and girls, mine and Rory's opinion only matters so much. Let us know in the comments down below your guys' thoughts on the Sounders being eliminated from playoff contention this season. We have a full jam-packed day for the final game of the season against San Jose, which now it doesn't matter, but we can smile, enjoy it. It'll be a good time. We will have pre-game coverage. I'll be doing some fun stuff with the fans, and then our usual post-match coverage with the review, fan cams. Maybe we'll add a bonus where we're going to get your guys' thoughts in one compilation of this entire season. So if you're going to be at that game, this is the one to come hang out with Rave Green TV. But boys and girls, I hope you all have a lovely day.